Hey everyone, this is James from TDB bringing you another Inbetweenisode. Today I am going to be talking about a pretty interesting topic, and this topic came up when I was having tea with my friend Mung a couple of weeks ago, and we were just discussing kind of aging tea. He has a bunch of tea aging in some families' houses in Malaysia, things like that, and the topic came up, can tea be overaged? Which I think is an interesting topic. I don't think it's one of those that has like a slam dunk answer. For at least some of these categories that is like, could 7542 be overaged? I mean, that's a very interesting question. I'm not totally sure. Whereas some are a little bit more obvious. I think the answer is definitely yes. Pu'erh tea can definitely be overaged. And the most obvious examples are if something was processed to be consumed while young, or another example could be it's very single origin, so the tea just gets kind of dull and boring. So, I mean, that tea is getting worse as it ages. So, yeah, it's probably overaged in that sense, even if it could be just a few years old. So, single origin tea, misprocessing tea, but tea that is properly processed and intended to be aged at least somewhat, that becomes a little bit more of an interesting question. And I think the scope of the issue, this is like really more of an interesting issue to talk about than a practical one to worry about, at least in the West, certainly, because our storage is very slow. And so even stuff that you would think would age and be ready to consume soonest, which is also the stuff that you would anticipate could become overaged, it's just... It takes a while. It takes a while to get going. So something like a boutique iwu. And I think this is probably the type of tea that you would see the overaging happen the fastest, is like kind of these softer profiles. And if you really have a storage that's pushing it, so like a softer profile, so something like an iwu where you're hotboxing it, so you're doing kind of pushing the limits on how much you can age a tea. I think that's where we would find something that perhaps has been aged too much or been pushed too much. And I don't know at what limit that would be. Like if you're hotboxing it Marco style at like 90 degrees Fahrenheit and 65, 70 RH for 15 years for something like a boutique you from white to tea or something like that. Would that be overaged? We don't really know. I do think that's probably the sort of tea that you would find out soonest. So we're really sort of guessing at this. And historical comparisons are very hard because the pu'er industry has been very dynamic and has changed a great deal, even in the last 25, 30 years, where it really becomes the pu'er that we're used to. The old factory teas, 1950s, 1960s, 1970s, those are very much kind of a different era. And so while they are being pressed, they're pressed and things like that from kind of the same areas that are being pressed now. They were very much kind of pressed as sort of like very common tea, and they were pressed also for a very specific type of storage, which was traditional storage, which is pretty wet storage too. So those teas were produced to be kind of withstand very, very robust conditions, and that's just not the case for tea these days. Tea is being aged all over the place. There's tea being produced from all kinds of different areas and regions and things like that. So, yeah, and not to mention the personal preference factor, too. So, I mean, a single origin tea could be not uninteresting to someone at 10 years old, just because it's a little too monotone, not because it's necessarily bad, but another person could find that tea perfectly drinkable and very interesting. So, and there are certain people that just like sort of a brighter profile. So any pu'er tea could be overaged if you like consuming tea when it's young. So, that is interesting. And, the material, it loses potency over time. And so if that is what makes the tea interesting, and you just lose enough potency and the tea tastes like nothing, then perhaps it could be overaged. So anyway, so there's some of my rough thoughts about it. I doubt this will ever become a practical problem for myself. My storage is just too damn slow. It's going to be far more of a problem to get the tea to a point where it is kind of satisfactory to drink and age than it is kind of to be overaged. So yeah, that's something to think about. So just I'm curious to hear what other people's thoughts are on this issue. Do you have certain teas that you're worried about becoming overaged? I think most people that worry about certain teas becoming less drinkable, it's far more of a processing issue and like, ooh, the tea was just not very good, rather than kind of a storage issue where we're pushing it too much. So yeah, I'd be curious to hear what other people think about that. What people have people run into tea that has been overaged. Yeah, I would guess that some of the old hats from Malaysia or Hong Kong or something like that might have had that happen in the past. Maybe there's tea that's just not suitable for traditional storage or something like that, and so it gets traditionally stored and it's bad. So I mean, those could be sort of foreshadowing signs or foreboding signs for what we could consider to be overaged tea. So very much a hypothetical question, and I would be curious if just to hear people's different experiences with different storages there, because I think that's still kind of where we're drawing most of our knowledge from in the West. So thank you everyone for tuning in for kind of these just very rough and random thoughts about tea aging and potentially becoming overaged. I will see y'all next time. Cheers.